Hello and welcome to Global Eye. I'm Parikshit Luthra. United States President Donald Trump's tariff flip-flops have kept global markets on the edge. Trump, who refers to himself as the tariff king and makes no qualms about using it as a negotiating tactic, have signed executive orders levying tariffs in the past only to impose a pause on them. Days later, this week was no different. The Trump administration's tariffs on Mexican, Canadian and Chinese imports went into effect on Tuesday, the 4th of March. This exposed most Mexican and Canadian goods to 25% tariffs, while China faced a cumulative 20% levy. On the same day, he delivered an unapologetic speech before the U.S. Congress in what was the longest State of the Union address in recent history. Trump summed up that it was payback time for countries that have used tariffs against America for decades. He also reiterated that reciprocal tariffs will come into effect in April, and that would be the 2nd of April. Going a step further, Trump explained why he did not choose April 1st as the date.
This system is not fair to the United States and never was, and so on April 2nd, I wanted to make it April 1st, but I didn't want to be accused of April Fool's Day. That's not, just one day was cost us a lot of money. But we're going to do it in April. I'm a very superstitious person.
24 hours later, he doled out a 1-month reprieve to the US's 3 biggest automakers. The breather was, however, on Mexican and Canadian vehicles and auto parts imported through the North American Trade Pact. The White House said that they did not want the automakers, General Motors, Ford, Stellantis, to be at an economic disadvantage. And last evening, he offered a 1-month reprieve to Canadian and Mexican goods covered under the North American Trade Agreement. As per a White House official, about 50% of Mexican imports and 38% of Canadian imports are covered by the trade agreement. It's important to highlight here that Trump's tariff exceptions excluded those imposed on China. Subsequently, we learned that the Trump administration has sought a zero-tariff regime for almost all goods being traded with India, barring agriculture products. The demand from the U.S. government comes close on the heels of Tesla gearing up to enter India. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal held high-level trade talks with his U.S. counterparts in Washington, D.C. However, it is unlikely that India will get any concessions from the impending reciprocal tariffs. India's External Affairs Ministry has confirmed that India and the U.S. are in the process of advancing negotiations on a trade agreement.
The two governments are in the process of advancing discussions on a multi-sector bilateral trade agreement. And as you would have seen in a joint statement also, I would like to repeat what we had mentioned there. Our objective through the BTA is to strengthen and deepen India-US two-way trade across goods and services, increase market access, reduce tariff and non-tariff barriers, and deepen supply chain integration between the two countries.
We're now joined by Mark Linscott, former assistant U.S. trade representative under the first Trump administration. Mark, thank you very much for joining us. How do you read the fact that Donald Trump first threatened, then imposed, then rolled back, paused tariffs? Does this indicate that somewhere economic reality is dawning on the administration?
Well, first of all, it's great to see you, Parikshit, and always great to join you in a discussion on U.S.-India trade. Frankly, it's difficult to track everything that goes on day by day and read ahead the tea leaves on what might come. We had day one of the Trump administration on January 20th, a threat to impose tariffs. In fact, that didn't happen. There were a number of presidential memorandums that laid out reports that would be delivered to the president with some delays in the imposition of tariffs. Finally, we had this action against China and Mexico and Canada, a very substantial action, and the markets reacted quite significantly. And there were reports of the automakers being highly concerned about the immediate impacts of those tariffs. In fact, 24 hours later, we had a change of heart, I guess, and a suspension of those tariffs for 30 days. I'm not sure what might happen during those 30 days, whether it's an opportunity for negotiation, for further agreements, but there's been a reprieve. So looking ahead, it's very difficult to assess what might happen. And I'm just pleased that Minister Goyal was in Washington. I think that was the right step to take to meet with his counterparts, the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer and Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick. I think they have gotten off to a good start, and we'll see what happens in the next month and beyond.
Right. The only thing is, Mark, we've not heard anything formally from the Indian side on the talks so far. No pictures, no statements either so far. But we heard Howard Lutnick right now. He was speaking at the India Today summit in Delhi, and there he said, we cannot be discussing things product by product with India. We need to do something very broad, something at a macro level, something that is big and brings duties on American products down significantly. Do you get a sense that here the United States and Howard Lutnick is actually indicating that they want 0 for 0 tariffs with India across product lines?
Yeah, well, in fact, I have not heard 0 from 0 from anybody specifically in the administration. I've heard reports on the Indian side anticipating that possibility or that position from the United States. I think what's more clear is that there's a focus on reciprocal tariffs, and there are calculations being made on the average level of Indian tariffs, the average level of U.S. tariffs, and an expectation that the gap in those average levels of tariffs will be eliminated. Otherwise, there will be action on the part of the administration. So I'm not sure that it's 0 for 0. It's more a focus on reciprocity and tariffs being roughly the same, roughly equivalent. But the bigger picture, as Secretary Lutnick pointed out, is negotiations for a big deal, for a bilateral trade agreement, a BTA, as agreed by Prime Minister Modi and President Trump when Prime Minister Modi was here only a few weeks back. That's the real deal. And I anticipate it could cover virtually any sector and address virtually any trade barrier. I'm quite bullish on the prospects for that. I think it will be difficult. It will take time. But I think that's the big game. In the meantime, we may have tariffs applied, but that the important thing is that they continue negotiations.
Right. We have been hearing that possibly the U.S. administration may want 0 for 0 tariffs on all products, excluding agriculture. But how do you feel things will progress eventually? Will there be certain product lines that U.S. will have in mind that they definitely want tariffs to come down, or they will say that you bring down overall average tariffs to this particular level and the average tariffs between India and U.S. have to be the same?
Yeah, I think that's the case, that there is an expectation that the average tariffs, the average U.S. tariffs and the average Indian tariffs are roughly equivalent. I think it's seen as the ball being in India's court, in Minister Goyal's court, to come back with a proposal that could realize that objective. Ideally, that could happen in the next few weeks. I mean, President Trump, in his address to the Congress, highlighted April 2nd as the date on which he will impose tariffs. We'll see. We've heard dates announced before and then delays and imposition of tariffs, but that currently seems to be the plan. Again, it's a bit of a wait and see of what India can do, what it can offer on cuts in tariffs. Not necessarily 0 for 0. I do think that there will be an eye to specific goods, specific sectors where there is a real possibility of U.S. export interests. It may be automobiles. I certainly think it will be agriculture. It could be chemicals. It could be manufacturing. Those will be the sectors on which there will be some focus.
All right. We heard reports about Tesla, how Tesla may actually be looking for zero tariffs, and the US administration may be pushing for zero tariffs on automobiles and Tesla cars being exported to India. Do you think that is a possibility? Because India wants Tesla to manufacture in India. But with the current mood in America and Donald Trump's open message to India that India wanting Tesla to manufacture there is very unfair, and they should be bringing down tariffs on US automobiles. Do you think in the current circumstances it's difficult for Tesla to commit to manufacturing and they would rather just enter India via the import route?
Well, I wouldn't venture into calculations by Tesla on how they enter the Indian market, whether it's through investment or it's through exports from the U.S., the United States, or other manufacturing sites. I think the point is that Indian tariffs on automobiles are very high, 100% or more, and there's an expectation that those tariffs come down. Sure, ideally 0%. I mean, that's what any exporter would like to face. I think the U.S. tariff on autos is in the range of 2.5%. Perhaps that would do the trick in terms of being able to reach agreement specifically on the auto sector. But the bigger point, again, is that there's an expectation that average tariffs across all sectors are more in line with the level of U.S. tariffs. And, I recognize that there have been negotiations in the World Trade Organization, the WTO, for many decades on tariffs. They eventually collapsed, and there was no new tariff deal over the last decade and a half on tariffs. But this is outside the WTO. This is a bilateral impetus to reach agreement on tariffs.
Okay, thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. It's been a very interesting discussion. Clearly, there have been talks between Howard Lutnick, Jamieson Greer, and Piyush Goyal this week. We'll hear more on that in the coming days. Let's see if the two countries can reach a deal in the next few months. Always a pleasure having you here on Global Live.